Today's episode is sponsored and brought to you by Leave Outdoors and Symbiosis Gear. Have you ever met someone out in the backcountry or the woods or a bike path and you're like, wow, they really remind me of someone special? Well, that's how we felt whenever we first came across Pa Ott on the Pacific Crest Trail. Pa Ott embodied what we thought was really kind of like the spirit of John Muir. Only Pa Ott really respects tribal lands and indigenous people. So I wanted to talk to this guy. This is the first half of a two-part episode covering our interview with Pa Ott with a special guest appearance from Tumbleweed. If you've listened to our podcast before, you've probably heard us mention Tumbleweed, but he's got his own dedicated episode. That's episode 72, where you can go and hear a little bit more about him. But Basecamp and I, along with Tumbleweed, met Pa Ott on the PCT, and so this feels like a very special episode. Today our conversation covers things related to Pa Ott, like his evolution as a hiker, how he hiked with his family as a kiddo and how that progressed into adulthood, where he worked as a ranger, and then why he decided to hike the Pacific Crest Trail in the first place. We also touched a little bit on hiking on tribal lands and what that means for someone who has spent so much time in the outdoors. I'm one of your hosts, Yeti Legs, and you're listening to the Yeti Walks into Basecamp Talking Through Hiking podcast, a show for hikers, backpackers, through hikers, tree huggers, and folks who just like to be outside. We're a hiking podcast with a goal to make the outdoors more accessible for you by telling stories, sharing info, and interviewing folks that have advice, gear, and peace of mind that'll make your next outdoor adventure a little bit easier. We also like to talk about environmental topics and what's happening on our planet. Knowledge is power, and as lovers of the great outdoors, we want all of us to feel a bit more empowered. All right, let's hit the trail. What is going on, Trail Family? Tram Bam. How's it going today? We're taking a break from some of our Environmental Corner episodes here, and we're doing a good old-fashioned fireside chat, just talking to a bunch of hikers about things that hikers talk about. And I'm really, really glad to have this guest on our show today, John Pa Ott Anderson. This guy is a legend that we met on the Pacific Crest Trail. And he may not think he's a legend, but Marie and I both do. We met him and his wife Wonder in the Sierras, and then continued to see him every once in a while in like Tuolumne Meadows, Timberline Lodge, and then later on we saw Pa Ott in a couple places further north up trail. But what Pa Ott does not know is that I have a special guest on this episode as well. It's someone that you know, Pa Ott, and I also want to ask you what your trail name Pa Ott means and how you got it later. But first, thanks for being on our podcast, and also a huge thanks to our guest for being on the podcast. You want to go ahead and share Pa Ott who you are? Do you remember Tumbleweed?
Yeah, Tumbleweed. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Sitting on the back porch, huh?
Oh man, living it up.
Man, you can hear the birds in his backdrop too. He's in Tennessee.
Yeah, I listened to the interview that Wesley and Marie did with you. I really enjoyed it. And I appreciated the kind things you guys had to say about me.
Well, I mean, you left a pretty impactful memory for myself at least, and I'm sure you did for Tumbleweed, because we saw you throughout the trail, but then we saw you at like some really emotional points towards the northern part of the trail. So
it was emotional.
It was.
And you just barely made it, because 2 days after I got back to Hart's Pass, well, a day after I got back to Hart's Pass, the fire closed the trail.
It totally did. We're going to talk about those fires too and your experience with that. But first off, I guess I should introduce you, Tumbleweed, in case no one has listened to your episode. The other guest that we have here is Christopher Maples, or Christopher Tumbleweed Maples. We met both of these gentlemen, Basecamp and I, on the Pacific Crest Trail in 22. And Tumbleweed has kind of been a lifelong friend ever since then. And if you don't know Tumbleweed, he is a deep motherfucker. So go and listen to our chat with Tumbleweed. He really gets deep and introspective about through hiking and kind of how it's transformed his life as an individual. But today we're talking to you, Paat. It's really great to have you. And I want to know, first off, what your hiking background is. And I remember you mentioning that you were a ranger for the Forest Service. So I'd like to hear a bit about that too.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Coachella Valley, Palm Springs area, that valley. I grew up in Thermal and Coachella and on a date farm there. And Martinez Mountain was what we looked at when we were kids. And my dad always wanted to take us hiking up there. So I started hiking when I was a little kid and was always, and so Pa'at is a Kuya Indian word, and we were always aware of the Kuyas had inhabited that valley we grew up in because uh, when I was a kid, it was not illegal yet, so we would go out hunting arrowheads. When the wind would blow the sand, we'd go looking for arrowheads, and so I just started learning about the Kuyas being part of that land, and then started hiking up on Martinez with my dad every New Year's Eve day. There, I'm the oldest of six kids, and my dad would take us and the cousins and friends, and we'd go hiking up on Martinez Mountain. Uh, and it's you can see Martinez Mountain from the Desert Divide when you're going north from Paradise Valley. So you guys have looked at Martinez Mountain, you just didn't know what it was. It's maybe 10 miles east of Paradise Valley, the top of Martinez.
Nice.
Yeah, so and then the reason my dad was like to hike, his uncle, his mother's brother worked for the Forest Service in the 1920s. So before there's a highway that goes up from Palm Desert up to Idlewild called Highway 74. That's what we crossed right there at Paradise Valley. That was not a highway when my uncle first worked for the Forest Service. They didn't build that until the 1930s. And so he would ride his horse up an old Cahuilla Indian trail. And so eventually we got reconnected with that trail, and now I've walked it with the Cahuillas as well. So,
Really?
yeah.
Do you go? Are they just your friends, or have you
Well,
met these
then, so
folks?
I did go to high school and was in church youth group with Cahuilla kids. But I never knew much about the Cahuillas at that point. But one of my sisters was a mail carrier, a rural route mail carrier, and she delivered to the one of the Cahuilla reservations. And so there's a bunch of airplane crashes up on Martinez Mountain. So one of them we found when I was in high school on one of those New Year's Eve day hikes. We found this plane crash, and then Wonder and I'll probably refer to as Flip at some points because that's the name she goes by. So anyway, we on our we got married in 1975, and we did a 5-day backpack in the Santa Rosa Wilderness, which Martinez Mountain is part of, and we found another airplane crash as part of that hike. In 2016, I'd started looking on Google Earth, well, actually 2015, looking on Google Earth trying to find some of those plane crashes, and I couldn't find the one that we'd found in the 1960s, but I knew where it was. So Wanda and I and one of our nephews hiked up and found it again, and then once we knew exactly where it was, we could see it on Google Earth. And then I do photo albums. And so one of the photo album, somebody looked up information and found out this plane crash. There was information about it from a guy in Arizona that he calls it aircraft archaeology. And he had been to that plane crash twice. And we found out the date the plane crashed. And so that following year, there were 11 of us that hiked out to that plane crash. It was an all-day hike. We started before dark and got back right at dark. And we did a memorial service for the three guys that got killed in that plane crash 60 years earlier. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
then this guy from Arizona says, well, that other plane crash you mentioned on top of the mountain, where is it? So my brother and I, we did like 5 hikes before we finally found it. And then when we found it, the guy from Arizona went with us, and he's all excited. He took all these pictures, and it was a hot day. So, I mean, a couple of days because it's so far out. It's a couple-day hike, and he gets back to Arizona and he says, we found the wrong plane. That's not the one I was looking for. So we did a bunch more hikes and found the other plane. And he went back with us. And so now I have all these pictures of these plane crashes. But in all of those hikes, we're going by all kinds of Kauai grinding rocks, old camping spots, finding arrowheads, finding broken pottery, finding the agave is a yucca that they would it was one of their Kauai's 4 main staple foods, and they would bake it underground, so we'd see where they did all that. So I had all these photos, and my sister says, John, the Kauai's would love to see where these places. And so we got to organize. It was during COVID, so there was going to be an in-person thing, and then it was also going to be Zoom. And then one of the elders died from COVID, and it got canceled. But two of the Queas said, "Hey, could we go hiking with you?" So this is April of 2021. And fortunately, I had some other people that were going with me because it was a 10-mile hike out to the spring where we were going. And the Queen, I think I was 69 at the time. And so these guys are going, well, that guy's an old man. We really don't need to be ready. We'll just, we'll be there and go. Well, it's a tough hike. So we had to help carry some of their stuff, but we knew it was important they got out there. And then once they did, they said, we got to do this again. So we've hiked together at least twice a year ever since 2021.
And we met you on the PCT in 2022.
Yeah.
So was that your first big through hike or your long distance hike?
Yes. I worked for the Forest Service. I actually worked for the state park first. So the state park has the top part of Mount San Jacinto. And I worked there for 7 seasons. And that's where Wonder and I met. She was a backpacker when I was working as a seasonal wilderness ranger up there. That was in 1972. And so our goal of hiking the PCT in 2022 was to try and get to the Canadian border on September 8th, which would have been exactly 50 years to the day that we met. And it worked. I mean, the fires had closed the trail, and Wonder went off the trail at Cascade Lock, so that didn't happen. But then I worked for the Forest Service later on the lower part of the mountain.
What drew you to hike the PCT?
So the brother of one of our son-in-laws was section hiking the PCT. And so when he was going to hike San Jacinto, he said, hey, would you like to go with me? And I said, absolutely, I'd love that. And so I'd hiked all over San Jacinto, but I'd never done from I-10. So his name is Goltec. He's a PCT legend himself. He just finished his section hike last year, but as he went southbound, he would pass out trail magic, and he would carry this big sack on the back of his pack full of individual potato chips, and then he had candy if people wanted candy, and he had coffee if people wanted coffee, Starbucks thing. And so over the course of the 15 years he hiked the PCT, he gave out trail magic to 4,230 some people. So,
wow.
yeah, his name is Goltec.
Okay.
So he got me started, and so I hiked from I-10 Oasis to Paradise Valley, and I just loved it. That was 2020. No, that was 2019, and then 2020 is like, I'm going to go with you next year. So we did from Etna Summit to Dunsmuir, and then by then I was like, I want to do the whole thing. And so my wife said, well, if you're going to go, I don't want to be home. So he was going to do 214 miles the next year from Dunsmuir down to Belden. And so I told Wonder, I know physically you can do it, but you like to have fun, and this is going to be work. So you've got to do this 214 miles to find out if you really want to do it,
Mm-hmm.
because I do. And so, kind of an interesting story. We, on the fifth day, we were just north of Bernie at Rock Creek. I don't know if you remember that. There's a bridge there and a creek, and we were hiking through it in a heat dome, so it was over 100 degrees. So we were laying in the creek to cool ourselves down, and then with evaporative cooling, you could walk and still be cool. And there was this northbound hiker, Honest Abe, and she told him what she was doing, and he just looked her in the eye and said, "You can do it." And up to that point, she was saying, "I'm not interested." But she started believing when Honest Abe looked her in the eye, and so she said, "Okay, I'm in."
I love it.
Yeah. So then the next year, then we got permits in 2022. It's like, oh boy, we're going to do it. And I had a business. I wild collected native seed, and so I had to sell that business so I could, because I had too many customers. Summertimes when you harvest all the seed to be able to hike the PCT. And then right before we started hiking, we left the terminus on March 17th. On the 13th through the 15th, we were hiking with the Kauias. We went back out to Alwalta Spring, and we went to the top of Martinez Mountain. They don't know when the last time a Kauia was on Martinez Mountain. They know it's over 100 years. And so there were three guys. Two of them made it to the top, and they had rattles, and they were singing creation songs in Kauia to the ancestors. It was totally amazing. Yeah, just incredible. And then we're camped down at Alwalta Spring, and I said, my sister, who was the mail carrier, she thought it'd be really cool if I had a Kauia trail name. And I said, you guys sleep on it, think about it. If you can't think of anything, no big deal. And Sean, one of them, he says, no, we know what it is. We don't need to sleep on it. There's this animal that it doesn't need much sleep, it doesn't drink much water, and it can go anywhere. It's a bighorn sheep, Pa'at. So that's how I got the name Pa'at. And then they told me, whenever you meet anybody on the trail and you tell them you have a Kauia named Pa'at, tell them that the entire PCT is tribal land. And so the day that we met you the first time, I think we saw you, we camped at Davis Creek, and then the next day we went over Donahue Pass. And you guys got over it before we did, but we were at Donahue Pass with Moonbeam and Old Lady, and Azul was with them at that point too.
Oh,
And there was some of the snow was melted right up at the top of the pass, and I found obsidian flakes there. And I found obsidian flakes in lots of places before Tehachapi and before Kennedy Meadows South, right after Kennedy Meadows South, and almost every pass in the Sierras in Oregon. So the PCT definitely is tribal land. It's not this recreational trail. It's ancient migration, trading, hunting route. Yeah.
even though it's hot outside, the nights can still be a little bit cool or, in some places, even freezing. To cut weight in my pack, I've started carrying clothing that I can wear during the day and in the sleeping bag for warmth while reducing extra ounces. For me, Leave Outdoors hits that sweet spot. With Alpha Direct tops, beanies, and pants, I cozy up in my sleeping bag with my back hurting a tad bit less at the end of every day. Cameron, the founder of Leave Outdoors, offers Alpha 60, 90, and 120 hoodies with different weights and therefore different warmth. But they're all only a handful of ounces. The bigger that Alpha number, by the way, the warmer the layer. He also sews a waterproof jacket weighing around 4 ounces. Let me let that sink in for a second. I know your jaw just dropped a little bit, didn't it? 4 ounces for a rain jacket. Use the code Yeti Walks into Basecamp, that's the name of our podcast, at leaveoutdoorco.com for 10% off Alpha hoodies, sun shirts, and even some new DCF dry bags he's made. But if you don't believe my testimony, then you can try out a free Alpha 90 hoodie for yourself. Tag us at Yeti Walks into Basecamp and 2 of your friends on your favorite Leave Outdoors Instagram post. The first one to tag us gets the swag. Thanks, Cameron, for sponsoring the show and for keeping the load on all of our backs a tad bit lighter. I've got two questions here. One for you, Tumbleweed, and then one for you, Pot. Tumbleweed, uh, I guess my question to you is, why did you agree to be on this episode and talk to Pot? Like, what's the connection there, and why did you feel strongly about being here?
So I remember the first time I saw you, you were walking in Ridgecrest and you had your pack and you were with Wonder, and I thought to myself, man, so many people I've met, so many people I've talked to, they've all said, no, I'm too old. No, I can't do this. No, no, no. They've come up with a myriad of reasons why they can't do anything. And I thought to myself when I saw you, I was like, this man is the embodiment of who I'd like to be, who I want to be when I get, as I progress in my life, that you're still drawn to it, that you're still willing to put yourself out there, that the wilderness kept calling you and you kept answering. And I thought I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to at least say hi and tell you, what you meant to me. So the several times that I saw you throughout trail, every time was a very positive experience, and you had a deep impact on, not only my hike but my life after.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I remember it was right in the middle of the street. And I said, "Are you hiking the PCT?" Yeah, it's like we start to recognize each other. It's like he must be a PCT hiker.
You couldn't
Yeah.
smell him?
Yeah. The green fumes off the back didn't give it away.
My question to you, Pot, you mentioned that the entire PCT is on tribal lands, which it is. I don't know. What's your opinion on us creating these long distance recreational trails on tribal land? Do you think it's positive? Do you think it's negative? Is it neutral? What's your opinion on it?
Well, I think it's positive. I actually I came up with a song last year. Wonder finally finished the PCT last year, and so we hiked from Stevens Pass up to the border, and so one of the verses of the song is we are not the first to walk this long way. Paiutes, Kauaias, and others came before. Their ancestors watch over us each day. We're on the PCT. So there's a connection. I mean, when you ask about me and nature, I've learned, and especially in these years of hiking with the Kauaias, I've they don't worship their ancestors, but they're aware that their ancestors are present when we're out there. And I've got stories to back that up on hikes I did on Martinez. And so I think part of the reason that we all enjoy hiking the PCT is that we are walking in the presence of the ancestors of the tribal people that lived in those different parts of the mountains.
Hmm. I mean, it's true. Were there any specific parts on the PCT that you felt more connected to the land than others?
There was
I mean, you got the whole thing. You're living out there for half a year, but a place stuck out.
there was a spot. It was right below a peak called Rattlesnake Peak, so it's above Sayad Valley on the way to the Oregon-California border. And I walked into this valley, and I could sense. There was something I could sense stronger than I felt anywhere on the PCT that this was an important tribal spot, and I don't know why. And so then there was a guy that I had met earlier in the trail. He had started at Sonora Pass, and Wonder and I met him just a couple days in. He goes by the name Autograph now.
I met him.
Okay, yeah, and so the reason his name is Autograph is when Wonder and I walked by him. It was late in the day, and he was with two friends, and he asked us what our names were, and we said Pa'at and Wonder, and he was really touched by that, and he said he wrote those names down on a piece of paper, and then the next day or a couple of days later, he found one of the PCT handkerchiefs, and so he started having people write their names on it, and then I saw him at Sayad Valley, and he was so excited. It's like, my name is Autograph now because of you, and I want you to. I've been looking all over so you could sign this thing. So he was camped. I heard him. because I had learned to hike in the heat dome, when I left uh, Sayad Valley, it was like 100 degrees, but there was a hose there, and I just squirted my complete body down with water, so I was cooled off. And then up the trail a couple miles, there was a tank with water, so I got more water there, and so I was able to hike in the heat. And I was camped up on the ridge, and the rest of the people all hiked up after dark. So I heard him go by in the dark. The next day, I see him camped out in the middle of this meadow at that spot that I really felt strongly that there was a tribal presence there. And so I waited on the trail for him to catch up, and I go, tell me about the dreams you had, because that place, I could really sense something there. And he goes, dreams? I didn't sleep a bit last night. The fucking deer were just eating my trekking poles. They were chewing on my backpack. I did not sleep at all. Yeah.
The ancestors have a sense of humor, don't they?
Yeah. So I don't know why I felt the Indian presence there, but he definitely didn't feel it.
These fucking deer. We came across this one deer. I forget where the cabin is, but it's on the PCT, and there's a deer, and there are comments on Far Out, and people call the deer Dickhead Steve. Did y'all see those comments?
Yeah.
No, I didn't see it.
Yeah, we didn't encounter Dickhead Steve, but there were a lot of deer there.
Yeah, and there must be a lack of salt in those mountains, because they definitely are after. Wonder and I last year, was not able to, when we were completing the miles she missed, there were fires, so she hadn't completed from Sayad Valley, or from Etna to Sayad Valley, so we hiked in the first creek across, it's like 10 miles north of Etna, and there was a deer standing there. So it's like, I know why that deer's here. So I found a rock that you would hold water. So I peed on the rock, and that deer just walked right over and started licking the pee. It was there because it knew these people are going to pee at some point. Yeah.
We had that happen in Washington. Deer were rutting up our pee and scared the shit out of us. I thought it was a bear in the middle of the night. It's just two bucks hanging out with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's for anybody who listens to this who hasn't hiked the PCT yet. You don't pee next to your tent. Do it a distance away, or you're not going to sleep during the night. Yeah.
That's sage advice right there. Boobies. It feels odd recording this without base camp, but I feel confident talking about boobs without her, especially because of the need for more backpacking equipment that accommodates bodies with a bit more curve. Sarah Berkeley, founder of Symbiosis Gear, also saw that need and decided to do what she could to fill the niche. So she whipped out a pen, paper, and a sewing machine to create the Aspen Backpack. When Basecamp and I hiked the Colorado Trail last year, she took the Aspen Pack with her and was a huge fan of the S-curve straps and how they were far less restricting on her body than a typical J-shaped strap, intended for more slender and, dare I say, masculine body types. The pack also has a 3-way adjustable strap and weighs around 1 pound and 9 ounces. Hike over to symbiosisgear.com and use the code YETI15 to get 15% off of the Aspen Pack. That will save you almost $50, folks. Thanks, Sarah and Symbiosis Gear, for being so darn awesome and supporting folks, especially women, who get outside. Tumbleweed, and you can jump in and ask questions whenever you want to, but I got a question for you. So I don't come from a background that paid much respect to Native Americans or indigenous peoples. There was never any like negativity towards them, but it just wasn't really talked about a lot. So whenever I hiked the PCT, I wasn't really hiking it and thinking about the indigenous peoples. I guess the only spot that I really noticed that and may have felt a presence was at Eagle Rock, because that was definitely an ancestral spot. Tumbleweed, did you feel like you were connected to the lands, or that there was a presence of, our ancestors before us anywhere on the trail?
I believe in grandfather and Mother Earth too. And like, I love that aspect of Native culture, that that our mother will always be there for us. Our grandfather is always there, the ancestors and stuff like that. It's a big part of my life. When I was out there, I think I remember that I had forgotten to smudge, as much as because and just something after Timberline Lodge, I think it finally hit me that, I can do this as well. And that I noticed when I did it that mosquitoes didn't bother me nearly as much. But my connection, I definitely had a deep connection with the land definitely at Eagle Rock, definitely when I got into Sierras over Glen Pass, definitely. Um, Feeling ancestors, I definitely felt like someone was watching, somebody was there, somebody was guiding, because that some of those passes were sketchy, and very sketchy, and I felt like somebody was there with me. For me, I was walking with my mother and a bunch of demons from the past that I was trying to, a bunch of dragons that I need to slay, as base camp puts it. But yeah, as far as recognizing native culture, I mean, and on the trail, I can't say that I thought too much about, the native that were there before. I did think, hey, this is what the land was like before any of us ever came around, and I was glad that I got to see at least a small portion of that. You know,
That's definitely true, although it's not necessarily true that the land is like it was before because
right.
we've stopped fighting, we fought fires. Now the fires are so much more devastating than they were in the times before pre yeah the Kuya say before pre-colonial. Yeah, because with us stopping the fires, now the fires are so much worse than they used to be. So they would have been bad fires, but not just thousands and thousands of acres. There would have been fires, but a lot of it just would have been creeping on the ground.
So you walked through Syed Valley or down to Syed Valley. Last time I was there, it was green and it was right before the big fire hit. And so when I saw it, it was lush, and I think there was like 200 and something blowdowns. I remember counting every single one of them, thinking, "Man, there's a lot of blowdowns." But I know I talked to Yeti about this probably two or three, 5, 20 times. But we talk about the how the land regenerates after a fire, how it goes through a devastating period and it grows back. And so my question is, when you were going through there, you said what, last year or this year, that when you went there with Wonder, what did that area look like when you went through it?
Yeah, we walked. We did not. Well, when we walked last year, we got in 11 miles and we met two southbounders. We had microspikes with us. It was actually exactly this time last year. It was June 17th and 18th that we went, and we went over some snow that wasn't bad, but these two southbounders said microspikes is not going to be enough. You're going to need ice axes. There's one spot that's really bad. And so when I looked at far out, I could see we were going to have 15 miles or more of snow ahead of us. And so we turned around. So we did not go all the way to Syed Valley. And then we were wise to turn around because there was somebody else that went past us and they slipped and had to be rescued. So yeah.
Hmm. For those listening, I just wanted to clarify a little bit about what we're talking about. We're talking about wildfire suppression. So Native Americans, despite what some people might think, and despite what others have told me, Native Americans used they were basically prescribed burns for several reasons. For hunting, for selecting certain types of vegetation, or removing other types. Maybe even like religious component to their wildfire uses. But anyways, they use wildfires as a tool of land management, and they knew how to properly do that. During the times of colonization, we started suppressing some of those fires whenever we could, or try to avoid them. And as technology has advanced, we've suppressed those fires even more. So decades and decades of fire suppression has led to this like huge buildup of fuels. And when I say fuels, I mean like litter. So dead limbs, dead leaves, pine cones, things on the forest floor that would otherwise be burned up and used in smaller fires. But now we have these huge accumulations of fuels in the forest, coupled to hotter climate and drier areas because of climate change. We get these big fires, and these severe fire events can completely cook an area. So if you get a really big, really hot fire, it can destroy the seed bank in the soil. And so nothing can really regrow. And so that's kind of what we're talking about with the fires here. We walked across a lot of burn scars on the PCT. I think everyone that I walked through, except for the one around Chester, had some regrowth in those forests. Even the Dixie Fire had freaking poodle dog bush, which was a fun one to try and navigate. Y'all could talk about your experiences with that. But poodle dog bush it's closely related to poison ivy, so it's skin irritant. So if you come into physical contact with it, it'll leave an oil and causes a lot of problems for you. So, but yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about.
I would add to what you said about the hotter fires and the fuel accumulation. It's also not just a hotter climate, but it's also stronger winds. The wind
Oh, yeah.
is what really drives the fire. And with climate change, the winds are worse.
Definitely. Thanks for adding that. Yeah, part of climate change is more erratic weather events, stronger winds. So, yeah, talk more about that.
The people that are skeptical about climate change, we picked cherries today, and last year we were picking them in the middle of June. And a friend just wrote, and she says, my memory of picking cherries in Oregon is always July 4th. And when we first lived in Oregon in the mid 70s, July 4th was when you picked cherries. That's when they were ripe. It's weeks earlier now. And with seed collecting, I saw that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's a real thing.
it is. We've discussed Basecamp and I if redlining will continue to be a thing, as fires become worse, especially in these western trails, the CDT, PCT, and smaller ones. People aren't going to be able to hike certain sections of the trail. They're going to have to either do road walks, or they're going to have to jump ahead, or just quit altogether. I'm curious to hear what y'all think about the future of redlining, given all the wildfires that we keep seeing, until the trails just burn themselves out and then you're hiking through a giant burn scar.
Well, I mean, there is regrowth that happens, and
Yep.
and you have better views.
Yep.
But it creates so many, the fires, just a few years afterwards, you get so many blowdowns from the dead trees that if you don't have the maintenance to go with it, it's just horrible hiking over it. I just hiked the Arizona Trail this year, and so the dragon fire that had the North Rim closed, it was interesting to see that in the national park, and I think it was partly in the Forest Service area too, all kinds of dead trees that were not fallen, they went ahead and proactively cut down the trees that eventually they had a crew available, so they just cut down trees that eventually, maybe they wouldn't have all fallen on the trail, but they cut them down and then cut them up so the trail wouldn't be blocked. I'd never seen that happen before.
Yeah, I've never seen that, but that's good forest management.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer long term to like solving the problem, but I think that we're definitely looking at, generation, maybe even the next generation not being able to enjoy, our backcountry, our wilderness, the way that all of us have been able to. The red line, having to stop at fires, mostly walking through a burn scar, you're not going to get to see the same beautiful things that we did, like Muir Valley, probably, or the valley before Muir, so I just call it Muir Valley. But the valley right before Muir, one of the more beautiful places that I've ever seen, will eventually burn up, continuing on the trajectory we're going. And I think that we're doing a disservice to the future generations of thru hikers. And those who are doing it now are probably some of the last ones to get to see, or even maybe be able to hike the whole thing. And again, I don't know the answer in how we solve that problem, but I do see that it is a problem and that it's going to drastically reduce the ability of, is going to be more reserved for those FKT type people. And, that's not me. I'm definitely not a FKT type person.
No, I don't think any of us are.
Well, I mean, prescribed burning is certainly part of the answer.
Yeah.
If you have administrations that understand that and do that, but it costs a lot of money, and it's also when I worked for the Forest Service, on San Jacinto District, they were pretty aggressive with prescribed burns, but they would often get shut down by DEQ, by the Department by air quality, because when it would be good conditions for doing a prescribed burn, it was going to create smoke that they didn't want people to be breathing. So yeah, it's like who's got the priority?
I mean, yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of red tape involved with all that.
Yeah.
Huh. And we're going to end right there today, folks. That was the first half of our interview with the legend, or in our opinion, the legend, Pa Ott, and special co-hosted with Tumbleweed. Stay tuned for the second half of our episode coming out next Monday. Thanks to the Fire Once Lost for letting us use your audio. We really appreciate you, man. And thanks to you, our listeners, for listening and for taking the time to hear about these epic people who exist in the hiking community. And whether you're hiking the PCT or you're hiking on tribal lands trying to find some ancient petroglyphs, or if you're just doing a cute little footpath trying to get your dog's energy out, at the end of the day, we are just all outside walking. Just wanted to let you know that here at our show, Yeti Walks into Base Camp, we don't use AI for anything. AI has detrimental impacts on our environment, and we just don't want any part of it. So just know that when you're listening to our episodes, each one is hand edited by our team with talent and integrity. Thanks for listening.